pro-democracy protest movement in Hong Kong has been arrested. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai was reportedly detained under the new national security laws that give Beijing more power over Hong Kong. According to Lai's top aide, he's accused of collusion with foreign forces. During an interview with the National's Adrian Arsenault earlier this month, Lai spoke about the risk of going to prison.
Is there not a chance that you could be spirited away in the middle of the night to a prison in mainland China?
Yes. But what can I do? Just keep quiet?
Demonstrators in Belarus are vowing to be back on the streets again tonight to protest against what they say was a rigged election. The opposition candidate has refused to concede defeat, but the country's longtime president is also refusing to back down. Cindy Palm has more.
Protesters shout victory as they clash with police in the capital city of Minsk. They took to the streets and say the election was rigged in support of President Alexander Lukashenko. Lukashenko has been ruling the country since 1994, but has faced anger from citizens over the handling of the pandemic, the economy, and his record on human rights. This election was seen as the greatest challenge to his power in years. The opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, was a former English teacher who entered the race after her husband, an anti-government blogger who intended to run, was jailed. Tikhanovskaya says she does not recognize the election results, which show Lukashenko winning nearly 80% of the vote. Foreign observers say an election has not been free and fair in Belarus since 1995. Cindy Palm, CBC News, London.
Two more prominent cabinet ministers in Lebanon have stepped down, bringing the total to 4, along with numerous members of parliament. The political departures come as the country grapples with the aftermath of last week's deadly explosion in Beirut. Lebanon's cabinet is expected to meet later today. Protesters have taken to the streets for 2 nights in a row, clashing with police and calling for the entire government to resign. Turning to national news now, the federal conservatives say they'll ask the lobbying commissioner today to open a probe into a government COVID-19 relief program. Salima Shivji has the details.
This is another outsourced COVID-19 relief program for commercial rent relief, emergency help for small businesses that are struggling. Now, in May, the administration of that program was subcontracted out to a company that has the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford's husband, on its payroll as a senior executive. A contract initially worth $56 million, then bumped up to $84 when the relief program was extended. The Crown Corporation in charge says it had to contract out the program because it just didn't have the internal capacity to administer it. And the Prime Minister's office says before Telford's husband was hired at the company, she contacted the ethics commissioner who said she wasn't required to do anything. But the government says out of an abundance of caution, Telford set up a screen and wasn't involved in any discussions related to the company. Still, the opposition says there are a lot of unanswered questions here, and they want the Finance Committee to look into this as well as the lobbying watchdog. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Ontario government has cleared the way for Windsor-Essex to enter Stage 3 of its reopening plan on Wednesday. The region has seen a decline in cases over the last week and increased capacity at local hospitals. Most of Ontario entered Stage 3 in mid-July, but the Greater Toronto Area and Peel region were held back until July 31st. Stage 3 allows for indoor activities like dining, performing arts shows, and the reopening of movie theaters. And that is the world this hour. I'm Idil Musa.
From CTV News at 10:27 a.m. today.
Hello, I'm Marcia McMillan from the CTV Newsroom in Toronto. Here are the top stories. Quebec's back-to-school strategy will be updated today. Parents of elementary students have been pushing for smaller class sizes and more options for remote learning. The We Charity back in the spotlight as the Ethics Committee prepares to hear from the former Ethics Commissioner. Meantime, lawyers are sifting through thousands of documents handed over by the Trudeau government over the weekend. Lebanon's finance minister has become the latest cabinet minister minister to resign in the aftermath of last week's deadly explosion. There are reports now that the blast killed at least 200 people and injured more than 6,000. Since then, protesters have been taking to the streets demanding government officials step down. China's foreign ministry is sanctioning U.S. officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, in response to Washington's sanctions on Hong Kong and Chinese officials. Meantime, Hong Kong police have arrested media tycoon Jimmy Lai, marking the highest profile use yet of a new national security law that Beijing imposed on the city back in June. The Toronto Maple Leafs ran out of miracles. They were eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs. They were shut out 3-0 by the Columbus Blue Jackets in the fifth and deciding game of their qualifier. For the day's top stories and breaking news as it happens, tune to CTV News Channel or go online to ctvnews.ca. I'm Marcia McMillan.
From CNBC Tech Check at 3:09 p.m. last Friday.
I'm Aditi Roy, and here's your CNBC Tech Check. President Trump issuing executive orders banning U.S. transactions with Chinese tech firms Tencent and ByteDance. Tencent is the parent company of the Chinese messaging app WeChat, and ByteDance, of course, owns TikTok. The order will take effect in 45 days. The scope of the ban remains unclear, but may attract retaliation from Beijing. TikTok responding to that ban and threatening legal action. The social media app claiming there has been no due process or adherence to the law from the Trump administration. TikTok has been at the center of an escalating technology war between the U.S. and China. Washington had already threatened to ban TikTok in the U.S. due to national security concerns. And Uber reporting its second quarter results Thursday. Revenue from ride-sharing took a dive. Gross bookings were down 73% as the pandemic limited people's travel. However, Uber's food delivery business more than doubled. The company has yet to reach profitability, but it says it will reach that milestone by sometime in 2021. Shares of Uber falling 5% Friday morning. That's all from the West Coast. See you back here on Monday.
From DW News Brief at 7 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Hong Kong police have arrested media tycoon Jimmy Lai and raided his newspaper offices. Lai is being held over suspected collusion with foreign forces under the national security law imposed by Beijing in June. Lai is the most prominent member of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement to be detained under the new law. There have been clashes across Belarus after President Alexander Lukashenko won a landslide victory in Sunday's election. The election commission says Lukashenko took 80% of the vote, but the main opposition candidate Svetlana Tikhanovskaya says the vote was rigged and wants to hold talks with the government. Germany's centre-left Social Democratic Party has nominated Federal Finance Minister Olaf Scholz as its candidate for Chancellor in next year's general election when Angela Merkel's fourth and final term ends. Scholz is the most popular SPD politician after heading the government's coronavirus stimulus package. This is DW News from Berlin. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DW News, and do visit our website dw.com.
In Hong Kong, it's the highest profile case yet against democracy activists under that new national security law. Police have arrested media tycoon Jimmy Lai and raided the offices of his flagship newspaper. Lai is accused of colluding with a foreign country to endanger national security. Meanwhile, China is retaliating for the U.S. decision to sanction 11 Chinese officials over the crackdown in Hong Kong. Beijing says it will sanction 11 Americans. Another move by the U.S. is likely to stoke tensions with China. It's the most senior visit by a U.S. official to Taiwan in more than 4 decades. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar praised Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's response to the pandemic. Azar called Taiwan's democracy an inspiration to the region and the world.
Some U.S. governors are pushing back against President Trump's executive action on added unemployment benefits. The president signed an order to offer $400 per week in supplemental pay. The catch, states have to kick in 25%. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the president's order is based on shaky ground legally, plus he says it's impossible for states to pay. And billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates says it's, quote, mind-blowing the U.S. hasn't improved its coronavirus testing. The Microsoft co-founder told CNN the process is slow and lacks fair access. Gates says you can't get the government to improve the testing because it just wants to say how great it is. Gates and his wife have donated $350 million towards coronavirus research. Global News 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining, guys. Appreciate it. Got some fancy-ass mineral water. They don't pay me enough to drink this shit. I'll be right back, guys. Thank you. Such little success.
This movement, Black Lives Matter, has achieved, it's changing so many elements of American life. The mascots, the police, the monuments, but it's also changing our language. And some of those changes are a lot more complicated and even confusing than, say, no more Confederate flags at NASCAR. Today, we're going to dig into how language is evolving right now and try and figure out how permanent some of these changes might be. I'm talking about capitalizing the B in black, or the acronym BIPOC that you might be seeing a lot more lately. I'm talking about Karen.
It's easy to pronounce. It's 5 letters.
To talk about what's going on with Karen, we found a Karen.
My name is Karen Attia.
She's an opinion writer at the Washington Post.
My mom has spoken about how she knew exactly what she was doing when she named me Karen. She was just like, I wanted you to have an easier life with the sort of privilege of being a Karen.
Up until recently, being named Karen had been a gift.
I'm black. My parents are immigrants, actually, from Ghana. And the part that was sort of amusing to me about all of this was, like, my parents chose not to give us, like, quote-unquote, like, Ghanaian names, ethnic names, foreign-sounding names. Like, it makes me pass. It gives me a certain level of privilege that typically, or African-American names, or quote-unquote, whatever you call it, you know, non-white sounding names, whatever that means, it's allowed me to move through spaces.
That is, of course, up until a few months ago, when the Amy Cooper video was seen by basically the entire country, and everyone discovered Karen is more than just another 2-syllable, 5-letter name that's easy to pronounce.
I think for the most part, like, at least the original definition was, you know, it's usually a woman of a certain age who is not afraid to use her privilege, and usually against a person of color, right?
This woman don't want to let a little girl sell some water. She calling the police on an 8-year-old little girl. You can hide all you want. The whole world gonna see you, boo.
Yeah, and illegally selling water without a permit? Yeah.
On my property.
It's not your property.
And the worst sort of behavior, of course, is using that privilege, that racialized and that gender-specific privilege, to victimize other people of color and black people.
Hi, I'm asking you if this is your property.
Why are you asking?
Because it's private property.
Because it's private property,
so,
sir.
Are you defacing private property, or is this your building? You're free to express your opinions, but not on people's property.
Okay.
So to me, at first we sort of laughed about all these things, and now as a black Karen, I personally, anytime I see Karen trending, I brace myself, because I think, oh my God, there's going to be yet another video of, like, a white woman, like, terrorizing a black person.
It's illegal to have a charcoal grill in the park here.
No, it's not actually. I just looked at the map. It says this is a designated barbecue area.
No, not for a charcoal grill. No charcoal grills are allowed. Do you want to see it?
Growing up, to me, like, Karen was such a boring name. I didn't really think there was anything special about it. I wanted my name to be changed to my middle name, Nicole, actually, but my parents wouldn't let me. I must have known something back then.
There's been a real backlash to the usage of Karen to characterize white middle-aged women. Some people say it's misogynistic. Some people have gone as far as to say it's like the N-word, but for white women. And then, of course, there are all the innocent people named Karen out there. You wrote about this backlash for the Post. What do you make of it?
There is this element of, like, people wanting to basically name and shame and impose consequences for this sort of behavior, for both casual and aggressive and violent behavior. And we've seen that this behavior can end in death in a country where white women very often are to be seen as being protected or should be protected at all costs. Basically, white women's tears and cries brings white men to come and protect them, and often that has meant death, maiming, violence, displacement, just being ejected from that space. It's just how race and gender have interplayed in a society that devalues black lives and elevates white lives. So when people say, like, oh, this is sexist, I'm like, no, it's being specific. It's being specific about how race and gender interplay when it comes to the caste system that we have in this country.
This is also kind of being formalized right now. A San Francisco lawmaker just introduced legislation called the Karen Act to make it illegal to place racially motivated 911 calls. Before this gets codified into law, would you like to propose a different name, maybe just a different term, so this isn't someone's name, your name?
I mean, to be honest, Sean, I don't care that much. I mean, is it annoying? Sure, but I think if anything, what is more annoying or perhaps more problematic about how it all is playing out is more so that the term Karen might be too nice for what we're describing. In some ways, the better term for describing what is happening is racist aggression.
Yeah.
I think what we're tiptoeing around in this conversation is can we name dangerous behaviors in a comfortable way? I don't think anybody wants to take that to the conclusion that you're saying, that you're basically saying you're acting in a way that is privileging yourself and dehumanizing others. I would think that's more uncomfortable, and that's what they're reacting to. But I agree that we should have language to call stuff out when it happens. I was trying to be a Nicole this whole time. I wasn't even supposed to be here.
So hard on white people.
Well, Nicole, I'm sorry you got roped into this whole Karen thing.
I know, but you know what? As my mom said, because my mom was like, I have no regrets about naming you Karen. She was like, now you can be a Karen, and you can call the manager out on systemic racism. I'm like, yeah, Mom. We're going to flip the script. We're going to, we're going to call out privilege. I'll be a Karen on that. So, to me, it's not that serious, right? What's worse than being called a Karen? Being shot by police. I get called all sorts of things, including the N-word, actual slurs, when I actually write about race. So again, to me, in this scale of victimization, as I said in my piece, trying to invent your own victimization when there isn't any oppression happening to you is being peak Karen. So as a Karen, I'm just stop.
What happened?
After the break, BIPOC and the capitalization of the B in black. It's Today Explained.
It's not important to us, but it's important to them when they get back. Thank you. She ruined.
Support for the show today comes from Yext. It's like text, but with a Y, which is convenient because you'll need to type in every customer customizable for your customers. Thanks, Spotify. Thanks. Who is Michelle Valerie? Listen free.
Just talking, and that's the nature of linguists looking at language. If it's not changed.
All over the map as a result of these protests for racial justice. Is that your sense, too, from the High Chair of Linguistics at the University of Arizona?
I think language is always changing, and that's the nature of language. If it's not changing, then it's dead. We'd be talking about Latin now instead. But I do think that the changes that you are seeing may be more observable by a larger group of people in a way that's beyond just linguists looking at language change.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of these changes that I've been noticing, starting with one that I think applies to you and to me, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, to be quite frank. BIPOC?
That is exactly what I say.
Perfect.
So I like the term BIPOC. I've been using the term BIPOC, and I do realize that BIPOC is used in a couple of different ways by people. So I use it as Black and Indigenous people of color, but there are some people who like or prefer Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Okay. And truly, I just started seeing this after the death of George Floyd, but how long has it been around?
It's been around at least, from what people can find, 2013.
It feels like a bit of a confusing term because for a lot of people, bi means something else. Bi means bisexual, and so classifying Black and Indigenous people as bi feels a little bit confusing, and then POC is pronounced POC, but in BIPOC, all of a sudden, it becomes POC, which is, to some people, might be like a Japanese cookie snack, for all I know. Like, is this term a little fraught?
I certainly understand that, but again, that's sort of the nature of language, and especially the English language. I don't know if you're familiar with George, I'm blanking on his. He's a white comedian. He's the one who smashes the watermelons.
Oh, it's Gallagher.
Gallagher, thank you. Yes.
You got it.
So he has a well-known clip. I use it a lot for my linguistics classes where he talks about the craziness of language, of the English language. And so he goes through, this is pronounced this way, but then why is this other thing with the same spelling pronounced a completely different way?
I tried to learn to read ahead of time. I'd ask my dad signs on the roadside, what does that say, Dad? He'd say, good food. I say, why? They both end in O-O-D. Those words ought to rhyme. It ought to be good food or good food. Why is it good food? All right, H-O-M-E, home. S-O-M-E, some? No, some. All right, S-O-M-E, some. N-O-M-E, numb? No. N-U-M-B.
It's a great skit, but I think that is the nature of how English in particular works, because it comes from so many different places.
Okay, so deal with the pronunciation, but let's talk about the meaning. Is BIPOC like a modification of POC because POC wasn't hitting the right notes?
Yeah, POC is fraught. I have issues with POC in the sense that it's one step removed from colored people. And so it has that, but also it puts together a lot of people with very different connections to, if we're talking about in this U.S. context, with very different sociocultural histories in this country.
For example, just to give people an example, like it puts me, I don't know what, like an Asian, Canadian, American in the same category as you, a African American, right?
Yes, it does that, but also, issues around what's Asian is fraught.
Right.
Part of that has to do with these terms that came from colonizers of how they chose to group people as opposed to people grouping themselves.
Yeah.
So that term has a lot of other things that are problematic within it, but it's a term that's been settled on for now to be able to group essentially minoritized people. But I think part of the problem with that is that it's not just minoritized people sometimes, because we have different histories. It's sort of like going back to how the Irish became white or the Italians became white. Who gets grouped as white, right? This term becomes everybody who's not white. But then who gets to be white has varied across history and is still going through some of that processing, right? I think separating and actually having a term like BIPOC matters. Black and Indigenous peoples, their existence in the United States is different, uniquely different, compared to every other group that we've minoritized in this country. How you get to a country has a long-lasting impact on your continued existence in that country. So, for example, for Africans in America who were enslaved here, being brought to this country as enslaved people, being forcibly immigrated to a country, they did not come by choice, that the impact, the lasting impact on them in ways that it wouldn't have for people who are newly arrived here, even though they may still be classified as black.
I guess this is a great transition to another conversation that's going on right now, and where a lot of changes are being made, which is the capitalization of the B in black. So a lot of newspapers, print outlets, online journalism are making this transition to always capitalize B.
Yes, I have been fighting that fight for probably more than 20 years, so I am so glad. Yeah, I've had this issue in publishing, both in the books that I've published and in articles with issues around B, because I always capitalize black when we're talking about the racial group, right? The reason I'm a proponent for capitalizing B when you're referring to black people is because you are referring to a group or a race of people. And in the same way that we would do when we're referring to indigenous people, or if we choose terms like brown to refer to people from Spanish descent or who are from Latinx countries, those terms should be capitalized.
But you bring up white. There is no movement to capitalize the W in white, is there?
I don't think there's a movement to capitalize it. When I work, I capitalize all of those for any people. So if I use the terms white, black, brown, or whatever, I capitalize them.
Huh.
Yeah, one of the things I'd worked on years ago was how limited the U.S. is in how it understands issues around race and ethnicity and naming practices that it has. Like when I was growing up in the U.S. as going to elementary school and whatnot, we were taught that there were 3 races, and everybody was grouped into those races, and it was either Caucasoid, Negroid, or I think it was Mongoloid.
Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Texas.
Wow.
In Houston, Texas.
Caucasoid, Negroid, Mongoloid.
Yes, so everybody was categorized that way. In the U.S., for a lot of its history, really thought about things in terms either you were black or white, or essentially white and not white, right? And so I think that has helped us to come to a very simplistic way of thinking about even this social construction of race, as opposed to what does humanity actually look like. So I think in the near future, we're going to be having these more complex conversations to get to something beyond maybe what people think about as crayon colors, right? But thinking about this complex history of who people are and in what ways does that matter. And we are now trying to grapple with it, right? So right now we're doing let's just try to classify everybody. Let's just make a box so everybody can be included, right?
Yeah, but does it end up becoming meaningless? Like, are there too many classifications? Is that a risk?
Like you said, at some point it gets to be like, well, this isn't helping. This isn't making any sense for us, and we need to come up with a better way of understanding humanity outside of trying to get into these fine-grained ways, right?
Sure. I also wonder how you help people understand these changes, because, some environments, social media, college campuses, can be very quick to adopt, but other people are left behind, scratching their heads.
The conversations that we need to have around black and indigenous people in this country, those are hard conversations that need to be had, and they're very different from the conversations that we would have for any other group of people in this country that we have minoritized in some sort of way. And I think when you use that term, you're recognizing that you're calling out these 2 particular groups because it's bringing up a conversation that we need to have, or several conversations that we need to have in this country. And right now, we are closer to having those conversations than we have ever been at any point in time, which is why we're talking about this term now. because the term was there, but now people are talking about it because it is becoming part of their consciousness and their everyday lives in a way that it wasn't in 2013. But all of this is going to be dependent upon white people wanting to engage and being willing to listen as well as to act from those conversations.
Well, Dr. Lanehart, I appreciate you having the conversation with me.
Thank you.
Dr. Sanja Lanehart is a professor of linguistics at the University of Arizona. I'm Sean Rameswaram. It's Today Explained. A little bit smarter about it in a
Matthew Broderick in War Games rolling. And this is stuff you should know.
That's good.
Thanks.
What's your name?
It's Josh. Okay, Josh.
Ali Sheedy in War Games.
Okay.
Clark.
I know what Aaron Cooper's doing right now.
Man, how cute was she in that movie? Like, I think they designed that movie for, like, every 13-year-old boy in America to fall in love with Ali Sheedy.
Wrong. I think you're talking about Short Circuit.
No, I never saw that. Believe that.
What? With Johnny Five?
I mean, I know the movie.
You got to see it.
Really?
It's pretty awful.
Okay.
Especially with, what's his name? Who is the sleazeball from Fast Times at Ridgemont High who is the ticket scalper?
Damone?
Yes.
Yeah.
He plays a Indian, like Asian Indian character. Like full on. Brown face and everything. It's really bad. The movie's bad enough. But then now when you go back and see that too, you're like, I can't believe this. I can't believe it.
I think he's Italian.
Oh, easily. Maybe Jewish.
Or maybe just a straight-up white guy.
He's definitely not Asian Indian.
No, he's not.
No. But anyway, go see Short Circuit.
Okay.
See what you think. Ali Sheedy just keeps looking at the camera going, I'm so sorry.
That was a big hit, though. She didn't have anything to be sorry about.
So I guess War Games is kind of in your wheelhouse.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little old for me.
Yeah, because I saw that when I was like 12-ish, and you would have been, I don't know, how much younger are you? 6?
I would have been 7.
7? Yeah, that's a little young for War Games, I would think.
I mean, I still watched it wherever, but I was like,
yeah,
that's hilarious. The computer's called Whopper.
Yeah, I mean, it was right in my wheelhouse.
Right.
I remember at the end of War Games, they lock in, they're decoding the code one number and letter at a time.
Very suspenseful.
And very suspenseful. And it finally locks in, and me and my friends memorized it so we could go home and plug it into an Apple II to see what happened.
What happened?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Because how do you plug in a number anyway? What does that even mean?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I remember a very rudimentary program you could run where you could type in like 4 lines of whatever, I don't even know if you call it code, and with a phrase, and it would run the phrase like 1,000 times all over your screen in a big scroll. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
I feel like I remember what you're talking about.
Just like 5 lines. It was like, the only part I remember is 20, go to 10. And 10 was the phrase, I think.
Ready, set,
something like that. I don't remember. And then I was like, man, let's just play Castle Wolfenstein.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I never did Oregon Trail.
I never did as well.
I was Castle Wolfenstein.
But like Wolfenstein on the PC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like move left arrow, right arrow, shoot dash.
Yeah.
Which is some sort of a bullet.
Yeah.
It was fun.
That was fun.
And I thought it was just like the height of technological gaming.
It was at the time. But now, Chuck, we've reached the height of technology, which is being tracked everywhere you go.
Look at you.
All the time by whoever wants to do that.
I'm going to change your name to Josh Smooth Operator Clark for that transition.
There you go.
Very nice. Yeah.
I like Ali Sheedy Clark. Josh Ali Sheedy and War Games Clark.
Yeah, this is a good one. Did you put this together, or was this you and...
this is Dave Roos.
Dave Roos, yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
And hi, Dave. We finally got to meet Dave.
And his family.
And his lovely family.
Yeah.
That we cursed awfully in front of in Seattle. Felt terrible.
Thanks for adding yourself to the mix.
And he was like, well, whatever. He was fine. His kids were adorable.
They were.
They were great.
They couldn't look at me, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They were probably just intimidated by your presence.
No, it was because I cursed so badly.
So this is good stuff, though. Facial recognition technology that they've been kind of at since the 1950s, which they rolled out as a test in 2002 at the Super Bowl in New Orleans.
Did not go that well.
No, it was a little clunky back then, but it's gotten a lot better since then.
Let me explain why. For anyone who's listened to The End of the World with Josh Clark, the AI episode in particular, everything associated with artificial intelligence got way better starting around 2007 when neural nets became a viable form of machine learning.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to train a computer what constitutes a human face and what to look for. You just feed it a bunch of pictures of faces and say, these are human faces, learn what a human face is. And they train themselves. And so around about 2007, 2008, 2009, everything that had to do with machine learning got way smarter because we started using neural nets. And facial recognition software is no exception.
Yeah, and there were a few things that kind of converged all at the same time, or around the same time. Social media's kind of coming on the scene right in that wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Was a big deal. Facebook, this is staggering. Facebook, just by itself, processes 350 million new photos through its facial recognition software every day.
A day. And every time one comes through, Mark Zuckerberg goes, mwah.
Like, you think it's neat when you put a picture up and it says, like, would you like to tag Emily, your wife? Because that's her. And you think, oh, well, that's super easy. Thanks, Facebook. But then you don't think, like, wait a minute.
Right.
How do they know that's my wife?
Oh, yeah.
And, it's like with everything else. There's privacy people that were like, whoa, do you guys realize what's going on? And then the 99% of the sheep, they're like, huh?
No, they're like, no, it's great. Like, I don't have to go in and, like, click 2 links or 2 buttons to make
tag
this
somebody.
happen. Way easier. So that was one thing. There's way more photos out there for those machines to learn on.
Yeah, like good, high-quality photos.
Right. 350 million a day just on Facebook alone, which means the machines were getting smarter. They were getting better and better at training themselves. And then lastly, that has led to a ubiquity in facial recognition. That the better the machines have gotten, the easier it has been to put together data sets for them to train on, which is lots and lots of pictures of people. The cheaper the technology's gotten, which means the more people that are now using facial recognition than ever.
Yeah, Amazon has a service called Recognition with a K, which is not a good look.
No, it looks very German.
There's something about replacing a C with a K that just looks creepy. Like when you spell America with a K,
yeah,
it means something. It means like bad America.
Ice Cube.
Yet they went right full steam ahead and called it Recognition with a K.
You have to say it like that.
You do, I think.
And you have to be like squeezing the air out of a syringe while you're saying it too.
So they have this. I didn't even know about this, but it's ubiquitous and it's not super expensive.
Right.
And that means that law enforcement agencies they don't have to like create their own. They can just say, well, just sign up for a Recognition.
Right, exactly. Because it's there and because it's relatively cheap, you can just get a subscription. Not just law enforcement agencies. If you have a photo sharing app or whatever and you want some facial recognition technology, you just contract with Amazon, and Amazon goes, here you go, here's our data, and you can, or like our code, and you can put it onto your platform. Anybody can use it. So it is kind of everywhere, and that makes a lot of people, including me, very, very nervous, because as this guy, Woodrow Herzog, if he's not Werner Herzog's brother, I'll be disappointed.
Oh, there's a lot of Herzogs.
But a Woodrow and a Werner, come on.
Maybe.
Anyway, Woodrow